The alien ship descended slowly through the planet's thick, swirling clouds. Outside the wide viewports, jagged mountains stretched into the mist, and strange winds tore across barren plains. The team of explorers inside the ship watched silently. Among them was Nilo, the leader, who studied the terrain with sharp eyes. He had traveled to many worlds, but this one seemed harsher than most. Its storms were legendary, and the readings from their sensors showed high wind speeds and frequent lightning strikes. Nilo's second in command, Myra, leaned closer to the viewport. She traced the outline of a small structure on a distant hill. "Look at that," she said, her voice filled with curiosity. "It looks like a human-made shelter." Nilo turned and narrowed his eyes. The structure was small, almost fragile-looking, with sharp angles and thin walls. "Humans?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "That thing cannot last a single storm here. It is weak, poorly built, and pointless. Why would anyone waste time making that?" Myra tilted her head. "Maybe it is stronger than it looks. Humans have surprises sometimes." The ship touched down on a rocky plateau, and the landing gears dug into the uneven ground. The team disembarked, their suits glowing faintly under the stormy sky. They walked carefully toward the shelter. Each step kicked up dust and small stones. The wind howled around them, carrying fine, sharp particles that stung their senses. As they approached, the structure became clearer. It was indeed simple, yet there was something unusual about it. The walls were made from a combination of materials that the aliens did not recognize, arranged in geometric patterns. Small vents and channels ran along the sides, seemingly designed to manage water and wind. The aliens looked at it and laughed quietly. "This is a joke," Nilo said, scanning the area. "If a storm comes, it will be flattened in minutes. I cannot imagine any human thinking this is safe." Myra remained quiet, her eyes examining the details more closely. She noticed small grooves in the walls and angles that seemed to guide the wind around the shelter rather than letting it hit directly. She also saw that the corners were reinforced in a way that reminded her of designs she had seen in ancient human architecture. Before they could discuss further, movement appeared near the entrance. A human stepped out calmly. His posture was straight, and he did not seem afraid of the powerful winds around him. This human's name was Liam. He wore simple clothing, and his expression showed confidence and determination. He raised his hand in greeting. "Hello," Liam said, his voice steady despite the wind. "You must be the explorers my sensors detected." "Welcome." Nilo frowned. "You are very calm. Do you not fear the storms here?" he asked, gesturing toward the darkening sky. Liam shook his head. "I have prepared. This shelter can withstand the storms. You will see for yourself if you stay." Myra's curiosity grew. It is rare for humans to be so confident in such extreme conditions. "What makes you so sure?" Liam smiled slightly. "I have studied the storms for months. I know how they move, how the wind changes, and where the lightning strikes are most likely. My shelter is designed to survive all of it." Nilo crossed his arms. "Words are easy. Structures fail under real pressure. I will watch, and I will judge." The aliens decided to stay for a short while. They walked around the shelter, inspecting it from different angles. Liam did not interfere. He simply observed them, making small notes in a handheld device. The shelter appeared small and fragile, but its design was precise. The vents allowed airflow without letting water in. The walls were angled to reduce wind pressure. Every part of it seemed intentional. As they finished their inspection, the first signs of the storm began to show. Clouds rolled in faster than expected, and the sky darkened. Distant thunder rumbled across the mountains. The wind grew stronger, whipping around the aliens and sending dust into their suits. Nilo sneered. "Let it come," he said. "We will see if this human can survive the storm." Myra, however, kept examining the shelter. She saw that the materials absorbed vibrations and deflected energy. "Maybe this human knows more than I thought," she whispered, almost to herself. The team retreated slightly from the shelter as the wind picked up. Liam entered calmly, closing the door behind him. The aliens watched, still skeptical. They had no idea that the storm about to hit would test their assumptions and show them a new side of human ingenuity. Above them, dark clouds swirled, charged with electricity. Lightning flashed in the distance, and the wind roared like a living creature. The storm was coming, and the aliens were about to discover that humans were far more resourceful than they had ever imagined. The storm clouds grew darker and heavier. Lightning flickered across the distant mountains, illuminating the jagged rocks for brief moments. The aliens remained outside the shelter, still skeptical of its strength. Nilo crossed his arms, watching the structure as if waiting for it to fail. Myra, however, could not hide her curiosity. She kept circling the shelter, her sensors scanning every detail. Suddenly, the door of the shelter opened, and Liam stepped out. His movements were calm and measured. In his hands, he carried small tools and some materials that seemed ordinary but had a precise purpose. He moved with confidence, showing no fear of the gusting wind or the increasing rumbles of thunder. "Welcome inside," Liam said, gesturing to the shelter. "It is safer inside than outside. You can observe how it handles the storm." Nilo raised his eyebrow. "Do you really think we will trust you? This small structure cannot survive the winds and lightning here." Liam smiled slightly. "It has survived other storms. This one will be no different." Myra stepped closer. "I want to see how it works," she said softly. She pointed to the angled walls. "These shapes, they are not simple. The angles must redirect the wind. The materials must absorb energy. This is clever, human." Liam nodded. "Every part has a purpose. The walls are reinforced with layers that distribute force. The vents release pressure so the structure does not collapse. Even the foundation is designed to hold the shelter firmly to the ground. I have tested it many times." Nilo snorted. "Words are easy. Structures fail under real conditions. You cannot survive the storm with such a fragile building." Liam stepped forward calmly. "You will see." He opened the door, inviting the aliens inside. Reluctantly, Nilo and Myra followed. The interior was simple but well organized. Every tool, instrument, and material had a specific place. There were no unnecessary items, only what was needed for survival and observation. Inside, the shelter was surprisingly spacious for its outside size. Liam had created compartments that reinforced the walls. Small devices monitored wind pressure and lightning activity. Myra moved closer to one of the monitors. "This is advanced," she said. "Humans rarely make structures this prepared for extreme conditions. You must have studied this planet carefully." "I have," Liam replied. "I studied the storms, the terrain, and the winds. I calculated how much force the structure must resist. I learned how lightning behaves here. Every detail matters." Outside, the first gusts of the storm hit. Dust and debris whipped against the exterior of the shelter. The aliens could hear the wind rattling the walls and the distant sound of rocks shifting in the force. Nilo frowned and braced himself. "It will fall," he muttered. Myra did not reply. She examined the structure with her sensors, noticing that the walls flexed slightly but returned to their original shape. The vents released pressure as Liam had explained. The building moved with the storm rather than against it. The first lightning strike hit a rock nearby, sending a shower of sparks into the air. The aliens ducked instinctively. Liam stayed calm, monitoring the readings on his instruments. "The structure is handling the initial impact well," he said. "It was designed to absorb energy without damage." Nilo's eyes narrowed. He did not like admitting it, but he felt a small sense of unease. The shelter was not collapsing. The human's confidence was not a bluff. Every detail of the construction was proving effective. Myra moved closer to Liam. You are patient and precise. Most humans would panic in a storm like this. You are calm because you know your work is solid. Liam nodded. Preparation matters more than fear. If you prepare and respect the storm, you can survive it. Suddenly, the wind grew stronger. Lightning flashed closer, and thunder shook the ground. Dust and small stones hit the shelter with force. The aliens could feel the vibrations through the floor. Nilo struggled to maintain his composure. He had not expected the storm to arrive so quickly or with such intensity. Liam moved through the interior of the shelter, checking instruments and adjusting small panels. The aliens followed him silently, observing how he worked. Myra was fascinated. She noticed that the materials used were partially flexible, partially rigid, and perfectly balanced for the environment. The vents and angles worked exactly as designed. The storm raged on outside, but inside the shelter, there was order and calm. Liam's design kept the wind, rain, and lightning from causing harm. The aliens could not help but feel respect growing in their hearts. Nilo, however, remained cautious. He refused to show his admiration openly. As the storm continued to build, Liam spoke calmly. Every storm is a test. Some fail, some succeed. Preparation and understanding make the difference. Watch carefully, and you will see the strength of human design. Myra nodded silently. She had already seen it. She understood that humans were clever, patient, and resourceful. Nilo still doubted, but even he could not ignore the evidence. The shelter was holding, and the human inside was unshaken. Outside, the sky darkened further, and the storm approached its full power. The aliens realized they had underestimated humans. They thought the shelter was worthless, but now they could not deny that this human had prepared for the unimaginable. The wind howled, lightning struck closer, and the storm's roar filled the sky. Inside, Liam moved calmly, a figure of quiet determination. Outside, the aliens watched in awe. The first lesson of the storm had begun. The storm was no longer a distant threat. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, thick and heavy, carrying electricity that crackled with tension. Wind whipped across the rocky plateau, bending jagged trees and scattering loose stones. The distant mountains were barely visible through sheets of rain and dust. Nilo and Myra watched from just outside the shelter, gripping their equipment tightly. This is worse than I expected, Nilo muttered, scanning the horizon. The wind speed is extreme. Any normal structure would collapse. Myra's sensors picked up subtle details. It is not normal, she said. This human's shelter is designed differently. Look at how the walls flex slightly with the wind. The vents are releasing pressure. It is clever engineering. Nilo snorted. Clever or not, it is small. It cannot hold against the full force of this storm. Watch. Inside, Liam moved calmly. He checked small instruments that monitored the pressure, wind speed, and lightning activity. Every reading was carefully recorded and analyzed. He adjusted a panel here, a vent there, making sure that the shelter maintained its strength. His movements were precise and confident. Myra leaned closer to Nilo. Do you see how the walls are angled? They guide the wind around the structure instead of letting it hit directly. That is why it has not been damaged yet. Nilo's jaw tightened. He did see it, but he refused to admit it aloud. Still, a real test is coming, he said. The heart of the storm will decide. Above them, the first low rumble of thunder rolled across the plateau. A flash of lightning illuminated the dark clouds, revealing the immense power of the storm. The wind gusted even harder, carrying dust, small stones, and sharp particles. Nilo had to brace himself against the force. Myra adjusted her sensors, measuring the pressure. The readings were extraordinary, far higher than what she had expected. Inside the shelter, Liam calmly monitored every instrument. He walked along the walls, checking for any weak points, although he already knew the design could handle far more than the storm was currently giving. He adjusted vents to release air pressure, moved small weights to reinforce the foundation, and made sure every joint was tight. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning struck a rock not far from the shelter. The impact sent a shower of sparks into the air, and the ground trembled slightly. Nilo and Myra ducked instinctively. Even Liam looked up briefly, but he did not panic. The instruments showed that the strike had no effect on the shelter. Myra's eyes widened. It is absorbing the energy perfectly. The materials are distributing the force evenly. This is incredible. Nilo clenched his fists. He refused to show the admiration growing in him. It is holding for now, he said, voice tight. But the storm is only beginning. The clouds above grew darker and moved faster. Wind howled with increasing intensity, bending trees and tearing at rocks. The rain began to fall harder, stinging like needles against the alien suits. They were forced to take cover behind boulders, feeling the raw power of the planet. Inside the shelter, Liam calmly observed the changes. He adjusted small panels to allow more airflow in controlled ways and checked the foundation for any shifting. Every action was deliberate, precise, and effective. The shelter flexed and swayed slightly but remained firm. Liam moved with the storm rather than against it. Myra could not help but speak aloud. The human is not afraid. He has studied every possible condition. He understands the storm in ways we cannot. This is more than survival. It is intelligence applied perfectly. Nilo said nothing. He watched the shelter through the window. The human was calm, almost peaceful, while the storm roared around them. Nilo felt a strange mix of frustration and awe. He had expected a failure, yet here was evidence that he had underestimated humans. Lightning flashed again, closer this time. Thunder shook the ground, and debris flew across the plateau. The aliens clung to the rocks, their equipment rattling violently. Yet the shelter remained intact. Not a single wall cracked, not a single panel shifted. Myra turned to Nilo quietly. We should step back. We are at risk here. The human has prepared for this. The storm is testing everything, and it is passing. Nilo gritted his teeth. Do not speak as if you already understand. We are not finished. The true test is yet to come. The wind grew even stronger, and the clouds overhead churned like a living entity. Rain fell in sheets, and lightning seemed to strike closer and closer. The aliens realized they could not hope to survive outside without the shelter. The human had prepared not only for survival but for protection beyond what they could manage. Inside, Liam continued his careful adjustments, moving efficiently and calmly. The shelter responded exactly as he had planned. He knew the storm would test every detail, but he had prepared for every possibility. Every gust, every strike, every vibration was anticipated. Outside, Nilo and Myra watched in growing respect. They had thought the shelter was worthless, a flimsy human attempt. Now, as the storm approached its peak, they began to see the skill, intelligence, and courage of a single human. The first lesson of the storm was clear. This human was not fragile. This human was prepared. The aliens would soon learn that underestimating humans could be a mistake. The storm arrived with full force. The wind tore across the plateau, bending trees and tossing rocks like pebbles. Lightning struck the jagged mountains nearby, sending fire and sparks across the dark landscape. Rain fell in sheets, stinging and blinding anything caught outside. The aliens clung to boulders and equipment, struggling to remain steady. Nilo's jaw was tight. He had expected chaos, but the human shelter stood firm. Not a single wall had cracked. Not a single panel had moved. Every gust of wind and strike of lightning seemed to slide harmlessly around it. Myra's sensors beeped continuously. She was fascinated. "It is working exactly as he planned," she said. "The walls absorb and redirect energy. The vents release pressure. It moves with the storm rather than against it. This is clever and precise." Inside, Liam moved calmly from panel to panel. He checked instruments, adjusted small vents, and reinforced weak points with his tools. Every action was deliberate. He did not rush. He did not panic. The storm's noise and fury surrounded him, but inside the shelter, there was order and control. A large bolt of lightning struck a rock directly near the shelter. The ground shook violently. Nilo and Myra were forced to crouch, bracing themselves. Small debris flew in every direction. For a moment, Nilo feared the shelter might finally fail. It did not. The walls flexed slightly under the impact but held perfectly. Water ran along channels in the walls and away from the foundation. The instruments inside showed only minor vibrations, nothing dangerous. Liam calmly noted the readings and adjusted the vents slightly. The storm raged on, but inside, there was no damage. Myra could not hide her amazement. Every detail matters. He designed this for extreme conditions, and it works perfectly. The structure is alive in a sense. It reacts to the environment, and it survives. Nilo's face was hard. He refused to speak praise, but he could feel the growing respect. His instincts told him that this human had done something extraordinary. He had underestimated human skill. The wind intensified. Rain pounded the shelter in sheets. Small rocks and debris hit the exterior with tremendous force. Nilo and Myra could see the shelter from outside. Every panel, every wall, every corner was holding. The human's design was flawless. Lightning struck again, this time even closer. A tree near the plateau split in two, falling with a loud crash. The aliens jumped back, terrified. Yet the shelter remained unshaken. Liam calmly monitored the readings and made a small adjustment to a vent to release air pressure. The storm's power was immense, but the shelter responded perfectly. Nilo finally said, quietly, "It is holding. It is, holding far better than I imagined." Myra turned to him with a small smile. "You see now. The human does not rely on strength alone. Intelligence, preparation, and understanding of the environment make this possible. This is survival perfected." The storm raged on for what seemed like hours. Nilo and Myra remained outside, holding onto rocks and equipment. They were exhausted and soaked, yet their eyes never left the shelter. They realized that not even they could have built something that could survive these conditions with such calm precision. Inside, Liam moved with steady hands, adjusting instruments and panels. He worked efficiently, making small corrections to ensure the shelter remained strong. He had anticipated every possibility and had prepared accordingly. Another bolt of lightning struck the plateau, closer than before. Debris flew in every direction. The aliens barely maintained their footing. The shelter shook slightly but did not fail. Inside, Liam remained calm. His confidence and preparation allowed him to endure the storm with ease. Myra whispered, almost to herself, "The human does not fear the storm. He respects it. That is the difference." Nilo did not reply. He still struggled with his pride, but deep inside, he recognized the truth. Humans were resourceful and intelligent in ways that could surpass even the most advanced aliens. Liam's calm in the middle of chaos was proof. As the storm began to reach its full intensity, it became clear that the shelter was more than just walls and panels. It was a combination of knowledge, skill, and preparation. Every piece of material, every vent, every angle had a purpose. The storm tested it, and it passed with perfection. Nilo and Myra finally accepted that the human had prepared for the unimaginable. The storm was no longer a threat to the shelter. It was a challenge, and the human had met it with intelligence and courage. The first strike of the storm had ended. The aliens, wet and exhausted, finally stepped back and observed. The shelter remained intact. The human inside remained calm. For the first time, they realized that humans were not fragile. They were clever, patient, and capable of facing extreme conditions with skill and determination. The storm was not over, but the lesson was clear. Liam had built something extraordinary, and the aliens could no longer underestimate humans. The first true proof of human ingenuity had been revealed. The storm had grown louder and more violent. Wind tore across the plateau like a living creature, carrying dust, small rocks, and sharp debris. Rain fell in heavy sheets, striking the rocky terrain with fierce force. Lightning flashed constantly, and thunder shook the ground. Nilo and Myra clung to boulders, struggling to keep their balance. They had never experienced a storm like this, and the force of it made them feel small and vulnerable. The shelter remained firm. Not a single wall had cracked. Not a single panel had moved out of place. Even as debris collided with it, the structure held perfectly. Liam moved calmly inside, checking instruments and adjusting vents. Each movement was precise, deliberate, and effective. Myra observed closely. The shelter is absorbing and redirecting energy. The walls are strong, yet flexible. The vents release pressure without weakening the structure. Every detail matters, she said, her voice filled with awe. Nilo's eyes were narrowed. He had refused to show respect before, but now he could not deny the truth. He felt tension in his chest. "It is holding," he muttered, barely audible over the storm. "It is holding far better than I expected." The wind grew stronger, bending trees and lifting small boulders. Lightning struck repeatedly, closer and closer to the shelter. One bolt hit a nearby rock, sending shards flying in all directions. The aliens ducked instinctively, fearing for their lives. The shelter shook slightly under the impact, but inside, Liam remained calm. He adjusted a small vent, allowing the energy to be released safely, and checked the instruments. Myra turned to Nilo quietly. "Do you see? This is not luck. This is planning and intelligence. The human has prepared for the extreme, and the structure is responding exactly as it should." Nilo clenched his fists. He did not reply, but he watched in silence. His pride made it difficult to admit that he had underestimated the human. Every strike, every gust, every flash of lightning proved that the shelter was more than just walls. It was a combination of knowledge, skill, and courage. Inside, Liam moved along the walls, reinforcing small panels and checking the foundation. He adjusted weights to balance the shelter against shifting winds and monitored every instrument carefully. The storm was powerful, but the shelter's design allowed it to move with the forces rather than resist them. It absorbed energy, distributed pressure, and protected the interior from any harm. A large bolt of lightning struck the plateau nearby. The ground shook violently. Dust, small rocks, and debris flew in every direction. The aliens braced themselves. They had expected the shelter to fail, but it remained intact. The walls flexed slightly, vents released pressure, and the instruments showed only minor vibrations. Myra's eyes were wide with admiration. "The human understands the storm better than we ever could. He respects it, studies it, and prepares for it. That is why it survives," she said. Nilo refused to speak praise aloud. He remained silent, though his eyes revealed a mixture of frustration and respect. He had underestimated human skill. Liam's calmness and the shelter's perfection were undeniable. The wind howled, and rain battered the shelter relentlessly. Lightning struck again, closer this time, and thunder shook the plateau. Nilo and Myra struggled to maintain their footing, clinging to rocks and each other. The storm was at its peak, yet the shelter remained unshaken. Liam continued his careful adjustments, moving with efficiency and precision. Myra whispered, almost to herself, "This is more than survival. This is intelligence applied perfectly. Every detail, every material, every vent has a purpose. The human built this for the impossible." Nilo looked at the shelter. He could see the truth. Humans were not fragile. They were clever, patient, and capable of facing extreme conditions with skill and determination. The shelter was proof of that. A bolt of lightning struck a tree near the plateau. The tree split in half, crashing to the ground with a loud thud. The aliens jumped back in fear, but the shelter remained firm. Inside, Liam continued his calm work, moving efficiently to ensure the structure maintained its strength. The storm began to test the limits of their endurance. The wind reached speeds that made it almost impossible to stand outside. Rain fell in sheets that stung like needles. Rocks and debris flew across the plateau. The aliens realized that without the shelter, they could not survive. Every human precaution, every design choice, was a lesson in intelligence and preparation. Myra turned to Nilo quietly. "We underestimated humans. We thought this shelter was worthless, but now we see the truth. It is not just a building. It is a demonstration of ingenuity and courage." Nilo remained silent, but he could not ignore the evidence. The storm was at its most violent, and yet the shelter stood intact. Liam's calm determination inside revealed that humans could survive challenges that seemed impossible. As the storm raged on, the aliens watched and learned. They realized that survival was not only about strength or size. It was about understanding, preparation, and skill. Liam's shelter was proof that humans could overcome any obstacle through intelligence and careful planning. The storm's fury would continue, but the lesson was clear. Humans were not to be underestimated. The shelter had passed the test, and the aliens could no longer deny the skill and courage of the species they had once considered weak. The storm had begun to slow, but its fury still lingered. Rain fell in lighter sheets, and the wind had lost some of its strength, though it still whipped around rocks and trees. Thunder echoed across the plateau, a deep reminder of the storm's power. The aliens emerged from their boulders, soaking wet and exhausted. They looked around at the destruction. Trees were broken, rocks were scattered, and debris covered the ground. And yet, in the middle of the plateau, the shelter remained intact. Not a single wall had fallen. Not a single panel had shifted. It stood firm, perfectly designed to survive even the most violent storm. Nilo and Myra stared in disbelief. Myra took a cautious step forward. "It is perfect. It survived everything the storm could throw at it," she said. Her voice carried both awe and respect. She looked at Nilo. "We misjudged humans. This shelter is proof that intelligence and preparation can overcome forces much stronger than themselves." Nilo clenched his fists, struggling with his pride. He had expected the shelter to collapse, but it had not. He had underestimated the human who built it. For the first time, he felt the weight of his misjudgment. "It is impressive," he admitted quietly. Inside the shelter, Liam was still calm. He checked the instruments one last time to ensure the structure had not suffered any hidden damage. Everything was stable. He moved through the interior, making small adjustments to vents and panels, ensuring the shelter remained fully operational. The storm had tested it, and it had passed. Myra watched him with admiration. "He is not only skilled, but calm. Most creatures would panic in a storm like that. He understood it and prepared for it. That is the difference." Nilo finally approached the shelter. He did not speak at first, only observing. The wind still pushed against him, and the rain dampened his suit, but he could not ignore the truth. This human had built something extraordinary. He had survived where others would have failed. Liam opened the door and greeted them calmly. "You have seen the storm," he said. "The shelter survived because it was designed carefully, with knowledge and preparation. That is how we humans face challenges. Nilo hesitated. Then he said, "You have proven your point. I see now that humans are clever and capable. I underestimated you." Liam nodded. Intelligence, preparation, and calm thinking are more powerful than strength alone. Any challenge can be faced with the right approach. Myra smiled. "I will report this. Your work will inspire others. Humans are not to be underestimated. This shelter is a symbol of ingenuity." The aliens stepped closer, looking around the interior of the shelter. Everything was organized and efficient. Instruments measured wind, lightning, and pressure. Panels and vents were perfectly placed. Every corner of the shelter had a purpose. The aliens could see how much thought and planning had gone into its construction. Nilo spoke quietly. "I should have expected this. Humans are survivors. They do not rely on size or strength. They rely on intelligence, adaptability, and careful planning. This shelter is living proof of that." Liam smiled calmly. "Every storm is a test. Some fail, some succeed. Preparation and understanding make the difference. You saw that today." Outside, the plateau was a scene of destruction. Trees lay broken, rocks scattered, and debris covered the ground. Yet in the middle of it all, the shelter stood as a symbol of human skill and courage. Nilo and Myra realized that they had been wrong to judge humans so quickly. Myra nodded to Nilo. "We must respect them. We must learn from them. Their ingenuity can teach us much." Nilo remained silent for a moment, reflecting. Then he said, "You are right. Humans are clever, patient, and capable. We underestimated them. That will not happen again." Liam offered small practical advice to help the aliens navigate the plateau safely after the storm. He explained how to avoid unstable areas, loose rocks, and water channels created by the rainfall. Nilo and Myra listened carefully, grateful for the guidance. For the first time, Nilo allowed himself to show respect openly. "You have taught us a valuable lesson. Not through words alone, but through your actions. The shelter, and the way you handled the storm, show that humans are remarkable." Myra smiled. "It is not only the structure, but the human inside. Calm, intelligent, and prepared. That is what makes the difference." As the clouds began to part, sunlight touched the plateau. The storm had passed, leaving destruction in its wake, but the shelter remained untouched. Nilo and Myra stepped fully into the open, still wet and tired, but filled with admiration and understanding. They had witnessed human ingenuity at its finest. The storm had tested the shelter and its builder. Both had passed with perfection. The aliens now understood that humans were not to be underestimated. Liam had earned their respect, not by fighting, but by thinking, preparing, and surviving. This day would be remembered by the aliens as a moment of learning. They had seen intelligence and courage overcome natural forces that seemed impossible to survive. They would share this lesson with others, never doubt the ingenuity of humans. The storm had passed completely. Sunlight broke through the clouds, shining on a plateau that was littered with broken trees, scattered rocks, and deep channels carved by rainwater. The destruction was everywhere, yet the human shelter remained perfectly intact. Liam stepped outside, his calm presence a striking contrast to the chaotic landscape. Nilo and Myra approached him, careful not to trip over debris. Both were wet, tired, and filled with a new understanding. Nilo's expression was serious, but there was respect in his eyes. Myra's face showed admiration and awe. They had witnessed the storm's full force and seen firsthand the human ingenuity that allowed a small structure to survive where nothing else could. "You have proven your skill," Nilo said finally, his voice steady. "We misjudged humans. We thought your shelter was weak, but it survived the storm perfectly. You have earned our respect." Liam nodded, accepting the words without pride or arrogance. "Preparation and understanding are stronger than force," he said calmly. Every detail matters. That is how humans face challenges. Myra stepped closer, examining the shelter one last time. Every wall, every vent, every panel has a purpose. You have studied the environment, learned from it, and built a structure that can survive the impossible. This is intelligence applied perfectly. Nilo looked around at the plateau, now quiet and still after the storm. The destruction was complete, yet the shelter remained untouched. It was a testament to human patience, planning, and courage. I underestimated your species, he admitted. Humans are clever, adaptable, and capable of surviving challenges far greater than we imagined. I will carry this lesson forward. Liam offered guidance on navigating the area safely. He pointed out unstable rocks, water channels, and areas where fallen trees could block paths. The aliens listened attentively. They had realized that surviving on this planet required more than strength. It required careful thought, observation, and preparation. Liam's instructions were simple, practical, and effective. The aliens began to prepare their ship for departure. They had come to observe humans, to study the planet, and to test their assumptions. Now, they had a new understanding. Humans were not to be underestimated. They had learned that intelligence and courage could overcome even the harshest forces of nature. Before leaving, Myra turned to Liam. Your work will inspire others, she said. I will share this with my people. They will understand that humans are not only survivors but innovators. You have shown us the strength of preparation and knowledge. Nilo nodded, his pride tempered by respect. You have taught us a valuable lesson, he said. Not through words, but through action. Your shelter, and the way you handled the storm, prove that humans are extraordinary. We will remember this day. Liam smiled, calm and modest. The storm was a test. The shelter was prepared. Humans face challenges by thinking carefully and acting deliberately. That is all. The aliens stepped into their ship, casting one last look at the plateau. The storm's destruction surrounded them, but the human shelter remained untouched, a shining example of intelligence, skill, and perseverance. Nilo and Myra realized that humans were capable of surviving and thriving in conditions that others would consider impossible. As the ship lifted off, Liam waved. The aliens waved back, a silent acknowledgement of respect and understanding. They had learned that humans were not only strong in spirit but clever in mind. The story of this shelter and its builder would be told among their people, a reminder that intelligence and preparation could overcome any obstacle. The plateau became smaller in the distance, the storm clouds fading behind it. Nilo and Myra reflected on what they had witnessed. They had come to judge humans and test their assumptions. Instead, they had learned humility, respect, and admiration. Humans were not weak or fragile. They were patient, resourceful, and capable of meeting challenges that seemed impossible. Liam returned to his shelter, checking the instruments one last time. Every reading was stable. The storm had tested him and his creation, and both had passed perfectly. He felt calm, satisfied, and ready for whatever challenge might come next. The human spirit had been proven, and the aliens had left with a new understanding of his species. The day ended with sunlight warming the plateau. The storm had passed, leaving destruction in its wake, but the human shelter remained a symbol of ingenuity, preparation, and courage. It stood as a lesson to anyone who might doubt the capabilities of humans. Nilo and Myra's ship disappeared into the sky, carrying with it respect and admiration for a species they had once underestimated. The lesson was clear: humans could survive, adapt, and overcome challenges far greater than most could imagine. The shelter remained, strong and proud, a testament to human skill, patience, and intelligence. The aliens would tell this story across the galaxy. They would speak of the human who faced the storm with calm and careful preparation. They would tell of a shelter that withstood the impossible. And they would remind others never to underestimate humans, for their courage and ingenuity could meet any challenge.